Good evening, and welcome to the March on Washington Film Festival Spring Workshop Series, Minding Your Movie Business, Pro Tips for Emerging Filmmakers. I'm Broderick Johnson, producer of the festival, and we are thrilled to have you as part of our third and final event for our Spring Workshop Series. Each of these workshops, designed by festival board member and global entertainment attorney Craig Emanuel, are to share important tips in filmmaking from some of the best and brightest professionals in the industry. We hosted our first workshop on writers in March, directors in April, and now tonight we will shed light on producers. Film producers oversee all aspects and elements of a production, and they are also actively involved in the marketing distribution process. Most importantly, they are thought of or considered as jack of all trades. Films have always been a huge and critical driving force for our institution, along with first-person accounts from foot soldiers and icons of the civil rights movement. Our festival consultant, Opal Hope Bennett, leads our emerging and student filmmaker competition. And if you tuned in last month, she co-moderated our event interviewing past filmmaker winners from our annual competition. Our goal is to provide a platform for emerging and student filmmakers to shed a light on their incredible work. These workshops are curated and moderated by Craig Emanuel as part of the workshop series. We've screened selected short films by past winners of the annual competition, both narrative and documentary short featured films. The two films selected and spotlighted for tonight's workshop include the 2018 winner, Interference, directed by Robin Rose Singer and Ruya Coleman. A violent altercation between a police officer and African-American man on a deserted country road has left one person dead. An interracial couple passing by must decide what to believe and what they're willing to do about it. Our second film for our Spotlight series is a 2018 winner, Peg, written, directed, and produced by Nardeep Kermi. When a hate crime clouds the 4th of July, Mandeep, a Sikh American, must grapple with his fears and anxieties as he attempts to celebrate the holiday with his wife and infant son. As tensions rise and compound through various microaggressions and racially charged encounters, Mandeep makes a tragic decision that changes his identity forever. Peg explores what it is to be an ethnic American in the current American climate. And tonight, we are delighted to have both filmmakers with us this evening. Welcome, Robin and Nardeep.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Robin, Interference is so captivating and had my full attention because it's so relevant to what's going on in our world today. How did you come to this story?
I mean, the film went through a lot of different versions. It was initially really inspired by the dash cam video from Sandra Bland's arrest. And then it really developed through a lot of conversations I had with my cast and crew as we worked on the film together. Lots of input from especially our Black cast and crew. They were just really hands-on in helping us shape the story to what it was. Risa Davis, Stephen Hell, Jamal Solomon, my DP, was incredibly instrumental. Michael Shenever. So it really evolved as a sort of collective piece of work together.
Awesome. And Nardeep, same question. Peg is so well crafted, smart, and focused storytelling that delivers its narrative with clarity. How did you come to this story?
Well, I'm sure some of you remember there was an election in 2016 that was fairly awful. I'm pretty politically connected, connected into the world. And after the election, I was fielding calls from friends and trying to make sure no one burned it all down and stayed calm. And I was taking a break and walking to my corner 7-Eleven, and along the way, a truck drove by, and two good old boys, it screamed, "Time to go home, Osama. It's our country again." And I hadn't heard that kind of rhetoric since post 9/11, and it just shocked me, being in liberal LA, that could happen on Sunset. So I decided I wanted to make this film about someone struggling with the erasure of their identity due to the society that we're living in, because they feel like it would be safer for their family to exist without that sort of identification.
Thank you, Nardeep. Robin, what has happened in your career with you and your film since 2018?
The film went on to do a really wonderful festival run. We were invited to NBC Universal Film Festival as one of their selections. We played probably about 16 or 20 festivals around the world. And beyond that, for me, I've just continued writing and directing. I wrote a feature script called The Lions of Mesopotamia that was about the true story of the Iraqi football team during the Hussein regime. And that was recently a 2020 Nickel finalist, the Academy Nickel. So, yeah.
Congratulations. That's pretty cool. And Nardeep, what has happened in your career with you and your films since 2018?
Yeah, we did a international festival circuit as well. Cleaned up a collection of awards, which was fun. There was some Oscar buzz at some point too. And it's living on YouTube now, and it's doing exactly what I wanted to do, which is start a conversation and introduce a lot of people to who a sick would be, even if they never knew what that would be. And as far as career goes, I've made another short film since then, which is also on YouTube called Unknown Caller. And I'm now in pre-production for my first feature, I think as a direct result of Bug, which is super exciting. So I'm hoping to make that in the next year. Thank you.
Absolutely. And sorry I mispronounced the film. And last question, Robin, what 3 tips would you give other emerging filmmakers looking to establish their careers in the industry?
I'm a big fan of the Olivia Wilde no asshole policy. So, genuine kindness and gratitude, I think, is really important to just keep expressing all the time. I think taking initiative is really important in your career. No one's going to give you permission for anything. So it's really just about being a constant student, taking classes, experimenting, Googling all the things you don't know, volunteering, spending as much time on set as you possibly can. That's how I learned. So that's all I can really offer in terms of education. And then aside from that, I think that people should banish the word networking from their minds if they possibly can. I know it sounds kind of weird, but I think it puts people in a weird state of mind where they're approaching everyone as a sort of stepping stone in their career, whereas what you really want to do is, try to build genuine relationships with people. This is a people business. People are, our biggest commodity, I guess, in film. I would say, like, that's what making films is all about. So it's really just about making those genuine connections that'll hopefully last you throughout your career.
Absolutely. Thank you. Nardeep, what 3 tips would you offer emerging filmmakers looking to also establish their careers in the industry as well?
Yeah, make mistakes. Make lots and lots of mistakes, because that's where you'll find that texture and that beauty that you're looking for. If you feel like you haven't found it yet, make mistakes, take those risks, and run with them, because you'll find something there. A lesson I constantly have to reteach myself is that perfection is a lie. Nothing will ever be perfect. The screenplay is never going to be perfect. Like, get it out there. The edit's never going to be perfect. Get it out there. Don't try and shoot for perfection, because that's a lie. It doesn't exist. Perfection is making the thing, and then the last thing I would say is you don't need to do it alone. I, for the longest time, and I feel like, I don't know, Raman, if this is the case for you, but like, we feel like we have to do everything ourselves. And the reality is you don't. There's thousands and thousands of people out there who are ready to jump for you, especially if you're passionate about your story. So all you have to do is just ask. And the work inevitably is infinitely better with more people involved than if you're just trying to do it by yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for all your insights and for joining us, Robin and Nardeep. And please keep us informed on the future project films that you're working on now, so we can help support you. And to our audience members, make sure you catch both films on our Eventive platform for the rest of the month. And thank you. And now, without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to our moderator for the evening, Craig Emanuel.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for what is the final of a series of 3 panels focusing on issues relevant to writers, directors, and producers. I don't want to say that we've left the best panel to last, as the previous two panels have been quite extraordinary. But I think today we're all in for a real treat as we're able to present to you three wonderfully interesting, engaging, and talented people to finish off our 3-month program. This afternoon's panel is focusing on issues relevant to producers, but two of our panelists are also directors, and so we will get the benefit of their insight of people who have functioned in multi-hyphenate positions. Our third panelist started out as a producer, had a successful career as a studio executive, and has now come back to his true passion again, which is focusing on producing. Before we start talking to our panelists, I would like to take a few moments to briefly introduce each of them to you. Sometimes in these panel discussions, I'm tempted to skip over the introduction of the panelists and tell the audience that they can read their bios in the material or online. But the bios and backgrounds of each of our three panelists today should be inspiring to our audience of aspiring producers, directors, and writers who will hopefully come away from the last panel with the knowledge that through hard work and persistence, there is nothing you can't achieve if you set your mind to it. So with that in mind, let me introduce our panelists. Haifaa Al Mansour. Haifaa is the first female filmmaker from Saudi Arabia. She earned a bachelor's degree in literature from the American University in Cairo and completed a master's degree in directing and film studies from the University of Sydney, Australia. The success of her 3 short films, as well as the international acclaim of her award-winning 2005 documentary Women Without Shadows, influenced a new wave of Saudi filmmakers, living proof that there is a place everywhere in the world for voices to be heard. Haifaa's acclaimed 2012 film Wajda received numerous awards and accolades at festivals around the world and was nominated for a BAFTA for Best Foreign Language Film. Haifaa's last film, The Perfect Candidate, is about a female doctor who runs for political office in Saudi Arabia, who as a woman occasionally finds it hard to be taken seriously. Sounds familiar? You bet. Haifaa, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. As someone who's known you for quite a long time, you're a constant inspiration to me and a reminder that taking no for an answer is not an option. It may be a roadblock, but it's never an ending place. So thank you for joining us. Paola de Florio. Paola is an Oscar and Emmy-nominated filmmaker and television producer and the founder and president of Counterpoint Films. Her work is focused on the extraordinary individuals and the triumph of the human spirit. Her credits include Speaking in Strings, Home of the Brave, Awake, The Life of Yogananda, one of the top-grossing indie documentaries of 2014 and 2015, and the CNN Emmy-nominated The 70s. Her work is screened at Sundance, the US Congress, and even the British House of Lords. Didn't know that before I read your bio, Paola, and has been distributed theatrically throughout the world. Paola has been a guest lecturer at UCLA, USC, UC Berkeley, and Stanford, and is a mentor for teenage girls at the Academy's Spark program. Her company, Counterpoint Films, which she runs with her husband and business partner, Peter, is a pioneer and leader in conscious media, a rising genre of entertainment. Paola, like Haifaa, has been an inspiring person throughout her career. She is also someone who it is impossible not to like. In the years that I have known her, I don't think I've ever seen Paola angry. She is always smiling and has a calming manner that is truly infectious. There is no doubt that Paola's work has been a strong influence in my own commitment to working with organizations that focus on civil rights and human rights related issues. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. So thank you, Paola, for being here with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Ted Hope. By last and certainly no means least, Ted's 35-year career in the film business begins with a deep love of cinema, its history, and recognition of its potential. Whether it's helping to launch Amazon Studios' original movie strategy or introducing new filmmaker voices and new approaches to new audiences from his independent film producing days, Ted champions diverse and bold voices from the world over. In June 2020, Ted stepped down as the co-head of movies at Amazon Studios where for over 5 years he saw the prestige movies produced, developed, and acquired by that company, including Sound of Metal and Manchester by the Sea. He currently enjoys a first-look deal with Amazon Studios for his own feature films. His production, Tender Bar, starring Ben Affleck and directed by George Clooney, is currently in production. And next month, Ted begins production on Cassandra, a film starring Gael Garcia Bernal and directed by Roger Ross Williams. He has executive produced 2 documentaries in 2021, including Who We Are, A Chronicle of Racism in America, directed by Emily and Sarah Kunstler, which won the Documentary Spotlight Audience Award at this year's South by Southwest Film Festival. Prior to joining Amazon, Ted produced over 70 films, as well as co-founding and co-running the production company Good Machine, which we will talk a little bit about later. I don't represent a lot of producers, but when someone like Ted, who has such a passion for our industry, reaches out and asks you to work with him, it's truly hard to say no. So Ted, thank you for joining us today. For those of you in the audience, after I've asked our panel a series of questions, there will hopefully be some time for us to be able to do some Q&A with our panelists, which you can do via chat. That can then be directed to my attention from our producers. So let's jump in and get started. Haifaa, let's start with you. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like growing up as one of 12 children in Saudi, and the influence your father, Abdul Rahman Mansour, had on you, who was a poet and who I understand introduced you to films by video, given that there were no movie theaters in Saudi Arabia between 1983 and 2018. Perhaps without talking specifically about Wajda and The Perfect Candidate, which we'll discuss separately, it would be great if you could talk about those early days and how they influenced your interest in becoming both a director and a producer.
Oh, thank you so much, Craig, for this amazing panel. Yeah, I grew up in Saudi Arabia in a small town, which is really like it's a place where imagination has to go wild. Otherwise, you will die. It is so boring. I'm very fortunate that my parents were like they give us a chance to watch movies or to listen to music when Saudi Arabia was very conservative, and a lot of I go to school. Like when I go to school, people tell me if you hear music, you'll die, and that gave me sort of a normal childhood. And being one of 12 kids, of course, it taught me how to maneuver life and to take opportunities whenever there is. But I think it is, I'm growing in a place like Saudi Arabia. I appreciated having a voice, and that is what made me make films, is like to express myself and always strive to share it with the world. And I think it is very important to not forget that, especially when we are sometimes women and like women of color, we feel like we don't have say on a lot of things. And it is exactly like how I grew up in Saudi. Like it is, you take things as they are and be grateful for the little thing you have. And I think it is important for us women to break away from that and have our voices heard. So I don't know if that answers your question, Craig.
So when you were watching videos, was there restrictions? I imagine there were restrictions on the kind of film content that you could even watch.
Oh, absolutely. There is like all the films, like if there is a kiss, and like the editing is not like smooth. You would know something just like completely in a different place. And there's no ratings also, like for like horror films, for example. And my father, one afternoon, he went and rented Evil Death, and I was maybe 12 at the time, and my sisters and brothers, like younger than me, were in a room. He went and just closed the door and and left us there. It was just a traumatizing experience. Horror films really still scare me until today. But yeah, there's no the movies were not. Yeah, there is no ratings, and there is a lot of censorship, but only on like sexual content or like religious stuff. Horror films will go.
And so when you decided that you wanted to go to Cairo and potentially study to be a filmmaker, as a female growing up in Saudi, do you get pushback from doing that and saying that's not what a woman should be doing?
Absolutely. It's always like there is a pushback when that is what not a woman should be doing, especially when it comes from Saudi Arabia. And that for so long, it made me scared of like talking about things that are really important to me. But I think after I finished college and I went back home and I started working and I worked in an oil company, I felt like invisible, and that feeling of not being able to be, not being seen and skipped in the meetings and made me look for storytelling as kind of therapy, just like to be to just feel that I existed. And I sent my first short film to a small film festival in Abu Dhabi, and it got accepted, and they sent me a ticket, and I went, and I felt important. Like people were talking to me, and it's like, you're the first female filmmaker from Saudi Arabia, and I was like, yes, I am. And it is really not planned at all, but it is. I think, yeah, I'll claim that title.
Paola, tell us a little bit about what led you to a career as a director and producer of both, television and documentaries. I mean, it seems like you've always been driven to tell stories about real life characters, working as a segment director on the television series Civil War Journals in 1993. Your documentaries have covered such subjects of the life of the Italian-born violinist Nadia Salerno Sonnenberg in your Academy-nominated documentary Speaking with Strings, to a documentary following the life of a Caucasian civil rights worker, Viola Liuzzo, who in 1965 was murdered by the Klan while driving with a black passenger in your documentary Home of the Brave. So what was your journey to kind of wanting to get to this place?
It's interesting. I think storytelling really it is a natural born thing. And I think for as long as I can remember, I think I was always an empath. I just remember even in kindergarten, nap time and hearing, a boy in my class who stuttered, like talking to himself. And I wanted to know what it was like to be him. And I could feel patterns, and see patterns in stories in people. And so I think and I was a writer, I think that, I was an English major in college and I just wrote a lot of diaries. And then somehow my first job out of college was in the news. And it's so hard and like it's just very factual. It's like just taking facts. But I worked it was very interesting at the time. But that idea of slipping into other people's skins and having access to people anywhere around the world and really understand different cultures, different ways of thinking, it just came easily to me. And that led me to wanting to tell people's stories and represent other people's voices.
Thank you. Ted, you've had an incredibly long and successful career, both as a film producer and as a production executive. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about the early years of how Good Machine came into existence and how you managed to cultivate relationships with such incredible first-time filmmakers as Ang Lee, Nicole Holofcener, Todd Field, Michelle Gondry, and Moises Kaufman.
Sure. I think when you say long career, what you really just saying, you're so old, Ted. You're so old. That's the best way to have a long career is to grow old.
Oh, that's right. We established that I'm older than you are, so I don't feel so bad.
It's funny. I think actually the story starts, and then I was probably that 5-year-old kid on the mat near Paola, stuttering. I had a speech impediment. Took lessons, into my teens. I just happened to go back this weekend to see my mom for her 88th birthday. And she was just talking about how I compared to my siblings and so on. She was like, even though no one ever understood a single word you said for the longest period of time, you always had a group of kids who were following behind you because you'd make stuff happen. You know, you would organize the neighborhood, you would get everybody into trouble or build something, new and troubling. And I think that's really, whether that's true or not, it's certainly the myth that I told myself I could make stuff happen. I was super fortunate to arrive in New York City, at that moment that, literally the year that Spike Lee and the Coen brothers and Jim Jarmusch all released their movies. I was drawn there because I'd been working in politics. I dropped out of school and was working in politics. And because I was traveling to places where I knew nobody, I'd go see movies. And I didn't like most of the movies, but when I saw Susan Seidelman's Smithereens, I was really, taken by it. And I was like, I'm going to go to New York and try to make movies like this, and that period, you have to be somewhere where you can find folks who are like-minded. And, literally my business partner, James Seamus at the time, and Christine Vachon, who became a longtime collaborator, and Carey, who became a longtime collaborator. We all arrived around the same time. And, now that I've left Amazon and working on some new things, it's funny, I pitched both Christine and Anne my big idea. And they said, Ted, I've been hearing the same idea from you for 35 years. Now you're just finally getting to build it. It's like literally that sort of thing. And I think it's the fact is, all of us who arrived there, all those people you mentioned, it was a time before the industry got as sophisticated as it is now. People didn't have agents, lawyers, publicists, managers, and so forth. They needed folks who could help translate. And I think having been somebody that nobody could understand, I really valued that piece of translating. People said, oh, Ted, you're able to talk art to the business people and talk business to the art people. And I could talk production, to how to get something made to those who hadn't made it before. I don't think it's so much an accident either that I got to work with many international directors doing films not in their first language, in that same sort of way, that so much of any industry starts thinking that there's a right way to do things. Mm-hmm. And that right way makes for a corporate voice, or makes for something that doesn't actually capture the nuance of us all. And really being someone who masqueraded as fitting in, but always felt like he didn't fit in, I really, took to how do we help make that whatever is unique about that individual come up and help be expressed, because that ultimately is the most universal thing, that we are all distinct people who need our voices to be heard and understood. So I try to do that translation.
It's interesting when you talk about, that period of time. I mean, I've been going to Sundance now, I think, for about 28, 29 years. And I think how much that festival has changed. And in those days, you'd go to the festival and no one had seen or knew anything about the movies. And it wasn't like all the agents had seen the movies in advance. And most of the filmmakers didn't have agents or lawyers or managers. And I really started my career as a lawyer is going to these festivals, watching movies and just making cold approaches to filmmakers after the screenings and saying, look, here's my card. I love films and I'd love to kind of work with you. And that's kind of, how I started my career. And now, any film that gets into a festival, even people who I find that go to some of these labs who've never produced anything, they all seem to have agents, lawyers, and managers. And I actually think you can lose something by getting ahead of yourself, a little bit. So that there is definitely things to be learned, from the past.
Yeah, if I could just cut in on that, just, I think one of the most helpful things that happened for me was the fact that you were able to build a community that was based around solidarity and helping each other in those early days. It was group learning at its best. There was no success in indie film. It wasn't what it was about at all. You were happy if you could support yourself. Still perhaps that way now, but nobody ever got rich for the longest period of time, and we would share all of that information. And I hope that it kind of feels to me that one of the nice benefits, though everyone won't feel it the same way, of the pandemic, is that as festivals come back into, real live events, I'm hoping the business steps out of it. The business will do the virtual part. They will do the piece of convenience for them to see it. And the people that love cinema, like I would go to Sundance on my vacation if I could, I would go, I'm dreaming of going to Cannes this year because I love it, not to do business, but because I actually love watching the movies, being around people that see movies and meeting people who are my peers and talking about movies. And I'm hoping that all that comes out and we can leave a little bit of the business for a second, wave or period.
I agree. Haifaa, throughout your career, in addition to being a director, you've obviously also functioned, as a producer, starting, with your first film, Watcher, which was a co-production, and more recently, Perfect Candidate, which was also, a co-production. I think I read that, in your case of your first film, it took more than 5 years to get made. And certainly there were some challenges and roadblocks along the way in trying to get a Perfect Candidate made, something I know, only too well. But for our aspiring filmmakers in the audience, perhaps you could describe just some of the challenges you faced in getting these films made and how you overcame them, so that perhaps they can learn something from your experience.
Yeah, I think it is very difficult for a first-time filmmaker always to find financing for their film. And you always hope after you do some short films or documentaries, you make the jump. But the jump is really to make a feature, you need a lot of money and it's a lot of collaboration. So it was, and especially in a place like Saudi Arabia where there is no industry, so it is hard for people to imagine that they're going to a place like Saudi Arabia and work. It took a while to convince people, especially Saudi was segregated at the time, but what I thought will help me is always to build collaboration with people on the script level. So I applied to Sundance Writers Lab, and I applied to every lab I know, every grant, and it was not only hoping to get some money here and there to finish the script and maybe have it translated, or it is more also building that network of people who are investing in filmmakers, and a new voice, and cultivating newcomers. And that is, I think, Sundance helped me a lot in trying to find producers or fine-tuning my script. And it is not going to be easy for the, I don't want to make it easy. It needs a lot of hard work, and then you need to knock on a lot of doors. But one thing you should not forget as a filmmaker, because a lot of people, you will have producers who sometimes come and give you feedback, and it is important that you take that feedback and not to lose your vision but it is very important to have an open heart and to know how to, as a director and as a writer, to bring everybody rally behind your vision and benefit from everybody who wants to make the film better. And that is sometimes I had to remind myself as a young filmmaker, because I was really guarded, and I had the script was different when I was writing it. The mother dies, if you're familiar with at the end, and I went to Sundance and they told me there's a tone problem and all that, and then I applied to the highest pitch competition in UAE, and the prize was $100,000. And then that is what made me like, okay, maybe I should really revise the script now. Money's talking. And that is when I really, it forced me to open my heart and forced me to really, like, maybe there is a tone problem. And I wasn't, and I stepped out of it. And I wrote the ending as it was in the film on that night, because here the carrot was like the $100,000, which we won. But I think it is important for young filmmakers to benefit from the experience of other people, and it's going to be a long way, but we should take no for an answer and be persistent.
You know, it's interesting. I remember years ago, I was like maybe 20 years ago, I was in a panel at Cannes, talking to producers, and we were talking about the opportunity to get financing from different European countries and all kinds of other things. And somebody, stood up in the audience and said, look, I'm a producer and I've not found it possible to kind of get any of these things. And so somebody asked on the panel, said, well, what have you produced? And he said, well, actually, I haven't produced anything yet. And the person on the panel said, well, then you're actually not really a producer. And I mean, it is kind of funny, in the moment, but I think you do sometimes have to make a few compromises along the way. Even successful filmmakers have to make a few compromises, and it doesn't mean compromising your artistic vision for a film or for a project. It's about realizing, as I think one of the filmmakers spoke about before, it has to be a collaboration. You don't have to do it alone. There are some really good producers out there, and finding those people, feeling comfortable that maybe you don't need Final Cut on your first movie, and recognizing there are other people who can contribute. It's something for people, I think, to remember and take seriously.
If I could just chime in on that, Craig, because I think there's an important thing that people sometimes forget, not to denigrate the legal profession and how important it is to build those good fences, on it. I would say, I think I've been involved in about 125 movies as either a key producer or a key executive. And I think on every single one of those movies, with the one exception, the film that went to the cinema on the big screen, as movies are, I would still say, meant to be, was 100% the director's vision, whether or not they had a final cut in the agreement. So precisely worrying about the final cut and what it says there isn't always the best place to put your energy. That so much of the type of movies that the people here make are the types of films that are going to be sold on the director's back. It's the director that's going to be speaking about them. And because of that, the reality is that they have control of the movie, because they're going to have to be speaking about it. Yeah. And even on that one movie that wasn't as the director intended when it went to the theaters, the executive, a guy named Harvey Weinstein, realized his mistakes remarkably, and when he put it out on DVD and on television and elsewhere, it was the director's cut. So it didn't work in the theater. He let the director have what the director wanted thereafter. So it's pretty close to perfect. So,
thank you, Paola. You've also been both a director and producer, on your own projects. In the course of the last few years, it feels like documentaries seem to be enjoying a little bit of a renaissance, and I think probably in part that's attributable to streaming services like Netflix, who have really opened up audiences to, documentaries, which I think has been great. But I think despite that, documentaries like feature films, also have their own series of challenges in raising financing, both the development phase as well as the production phase. I think there's also the challenge in documentaries that, they often require a substantial amount of time from its genesis through the time it's being released. And often, that amount of time and limitations in budget can also, I assume, make it challenging for a producer who has to figure out how to live, during, that period of time. But perhaps you can talk a little bit about the genesis of some of your own documentary projects and how you identified those subjects and made, the evolution from those ideas into films, and, talk about some of the financing and challenges you faced to get them to the screen.
Sure. First I just want to say that listening to everybody, there is this common thread here of, really wanting to express something that you feel at your core is true. And that if you hold on to, I just feel that I don't recommend my route, because it's like you can hold on for life with that and like never see something get done. But I think that there's something happening in the world right now, which is, we are being brought to our knees, the whole world, with COVID, with the way of life as we are living it has become untenable in so many ways. And we're being asked to rethink how we want to relate to one another as human beings. And this is starting to express itself in stories. And I think that it doesn't go unnoticed to me that this festival, which is based on, this incredible, the March on Washington, and these themes of people that lived by their truths, right? They lived by these truths that gave them the strength and the power to stand up for something. And I feel that, Martin Luther King, Gandhi before him, the satyagraha, that whole concept of just, the force of truth. I think as storytellers, like, we kind of hold that space, not to put ourselves like on the same level, but to say that I borrow from them. Martin Luther King is in my office, in my home office, it is. And so is Gandhi. It's like, these are people that just like at their core have a sense of what they needed to hold on to. And I think we bring that to the work that we do. Documentaries are impossible to make. It can be as easy as going in and pitching something, but I think for so many people, it's a long journey of making something that either is unique and people don't see it right away. There's so many no's. And like you said, Craig, it's like, you have to somehow get through that phase when you have something to show that somebody's going to bring more to it. So our company, we came up with just a model that is to create an R&D phase, research and development, where we can pitch. It's easier for somebody to say yes to an R&D phase. It's a great concept, a great idea. And you can show in some phase like that you could do some preliminary shooting and put something together and put a pitch together. Then you take that next step together. And in that process, you really find out who you want to work with too. So it's like, if you feel great and there's synergy there, then you want to go on the road together. And if not, it's not a huge investment on the investor's part. And then you can kind of part ways and you decide who owns the footage and who will go with it. So, and that's worked out for us. As far as, what's happening in the world right now and this renaissance for documentaries, I have to think that it's because I find that younger generations especially are hungry for real stuff. And it's just what's real. It could be real in real life. It could be authenticity. It's just no tolerance for bullshit. I feel like there's this drive for just getting back to what feels the stories that we need to share with one another. And it's what you were saying, Ted, like going to the festival and just connecting with people again, or Haifaa, what you're saying, like, you just had to have your voice heard. It was just impossible not to, you had to do that. It's that need to do that I think gets you eventually whatever money you need to start your process. And then it's just, there's a lot of talent out there and you just need to get your foot in the door. And I say, break it down. Break it down, make it accessible, make it a bite-sized chunk that you can then show. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, and get to that next step. And do it from a place that is, uniquely yours. Don't try to imitate. Tell the stories that really are going to keep that passion and that fire lit for you.
I think you made a really interesting point, and in part we discussed this in one of our earlier panel discussions. I think so often filmmakers, in trying to decide what they want to make films about, try and make films about what they think other people are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth of the matter is, if you've got a story to tell, it's going to be a far better story to tell if it's your own story. It's funny, people in the old days would sit in studio meetings and on a Monday morning and look at the box office and see what worked and sit around and say, well, why don't we have, one of those films in development, or production?
Right.
And it doesn't quite, really, work that way. It's interesting. I think about Home of the Brave and your decision to make a documentary about a Caucasian woman who was involved in the civil rights movement. And I could imagine many people saying, the civil rights movement is not about the white population. It's about crimes against, the Black population.
Yeah.
But your belief in this character,
yes,
her story, actually is in some respects a very unifying story, because the civil rights movement doesn't progress if it's only a Black story. We only progress as humans if, in fact, we both come together and all sides can see that there is a commonality of interest and a story to be told. So it's
I think, if I can just say, I think that Viola Uso's story, who was the center of Home of the Brave, it just goes back to what we were saying about storytelling. In other words, she was a mom, living in Detroit, married to a Teamster, had 5 kids, should not have picked up and left her home and her 5 children and gotten in a car and driven down through 3 states to stand up for civil rights by those standards in the 60s. But see, she couldn't help it. She had to answer a call. And I think that that's kind of what we're all talking about here, is answering a call. And that's what the people, that marched on Washington did. And this is what, this is what changes the world. This is how we get inspired. We have to live our own inspiration, and then other people will totally find theirs because we mirror each other. So that's what we need right now. So Viola was inspiring to me because I was a new mom at the time. And so I was having my first child and I was like, what? And I just couldn't believe the passion that she had and how she connected with it. And it did cost her family. And it cost Dr. King's family for him to be who he was. And as any leader in the world, pays a price. And so there's that side too. But you're right, Craig. It was a little ballsy to tell a story of a white woman in the civil rights movement. And we did get some heat for that. But then we also got a lot of people come and support us, because it is ultimately everyone's journey, not just one people's journey.
Fantastic. Ted, is someone who's been both a producer and executive. I'd like to maybe have you talk a little bit about when people are trying to pitch a project to a studio, to a network, to someone to attract financing. You've been on both sides of that discussion. When you're pitching to a company, what are the things that are important? What should people focus on to try and get people interested in their movie? What moves the needle?
Well, I think first and foremost, you want to be able to show that you're a good storyteller. I was shocked at how many people, while I was at Amazon, well-known writers, directors, and producers would come into a pitch and read a pitch. Read a pitch. Like, hello, one of the reasons I love being in this business is I love telling stories. If you can't, keep the dinner conversation focused on you probably shouldn't go into a studio and pitch. You should be able to work without notes and tell a good story. I think similarly, like I'm always wondering why this person, right? And why this story now? I want to feel both of those things from that conversation. You know, why is this person telling this story? And why do I need this movie now? And ultimately, I'm trying to get those signals of like, we're going to go, you know, have really tough times together, all who's ever making this movie. And do I want to feel like this person's got my back? And do I believe this person can trust me that I will have their back? You know, like that's a big question. Will I want 3 years down the road, will I still want to be having dinner with them and excited about the conversation that we're going to be having? Because it's going to take that long. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to see if they can pick up, you know, the clues that I'm giving, you know, in terms of where I'm enthralled and where I might be pushed back. What is their emotional intelligence that's there? Because that's really about what they're trying to communicate through the screen. How are they going to, you know, be able to move people, hearts and minds, you know, energy and all of that. I believe that cinema is a dialogue with the past, connected to this moment in time we're all sharing with a dream for the future. And I want to see how they're carrying that conversation forward. What are the references? You know, how it speaks of our life today, the why now, and what is the dream. Like I believe that things are beyond the movies. The things that we make are well beyond just stories, right? That we're introducing them to new people, new ways of life, designs for living, philosophies, beliefs. And that's all a super passionate and intriguing thing. It's why we're gathered here right now. Like, we love to hear how different people think about different things. And I'm looking to see where that engagement is. Now, I accept that there are different types of filmmakers. There are the shooters. There are those that are very character-oriented. There are those that kind of create something unique and distinct in that specific moment. And there are those that plan it out, you know, step by step by step. Personally speaking, I found that I work better with those that believe in what I call the experiment over the proof. I like to have something where we're all trying to learn as we go, and we're trying to create something new. We're trying to engineer serendipity and capture that unique thing that is about how do we reach beyond our grasp for something more, and sometimes bring it down to earth, right? It's really kind of a remarkable thing. And I think that all of that kind of speaks of the type of people who like to be in service of something greater than themselves, that want to be part of a team and part of something larger than just themselves. There are a lot of people you realize when you're in the room with them, there's no one else there with them. The room is not even big enough for them. And those folks, you know, more power to them, but I don't need them. They don't need me, you know. So I'm looking at all those things. You know, the question so much of like, what does the market want? And, you know, am I giving you one of those things that was the box office last week? You know, that's all changing so fast. It's so fascinating, you know, both due to the tools we have and our means of release. Like, we've never really been able to conceive of, design, execute, and deliver movies about this specific moment in time as much as we can do that today. And that's really exciting, you know. And then similarly, the way that we tell our stories no longer resigned to a single platform, that the story, the world can be communicated in different ways across different platforms simultaneously, that gives audiences a whole new realm of participation. All of that is so exciting that I just think, you know, if I can't feel the excitement about what it means to make a movie today, like some people are just like, wow, it's so hard, it's so terrible, but there's so much opportunity to do things in new and different ways. Like I feel like we are particularly sitting in this moment of transformation that is desperate and wonderful, and I like to see, that in a pitch. Like, just give me that pitch back. It's easy, right? I think a lot of it, just like the final tag, is respect, right? You go in to pitch somebody, you can walk out with $10 million, $20 million, $100 million, $1 million, whatever it is. So much hinges on that. Do the work, be prepared, put yourself in their shoes, what they would expect to hear from that. No, you don't deserve anything. They don't deserve anything except our mutual respect and dignity, and deliver that in the room, and it'll bring you a lot.
Thank you. Haifaa, as a woman from Saudi Arabia trying to produce and direct films in both the West and in Saudi, presumably that's created some challenges, over the years. Coming from a Muslim country, do you think that you've faced greater barriers in the US than might have otherwise been the case? And I'm curious to know if you think that over the course of the last few years, where there seems to be a growing appetite for more diverse voices, have we changed and evolved? But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on those things.
Yeah, I think still foreign filmmakers, and whether in the US or in the Arab world, need to assert themselves. And it's not easy to trust women because they don't have the track history. They don't have the same kind of resume to helm like $100 million budget film. Those paradigms have been shifting lately. So I feel very fortunate that I came in, and there is a conscious decision within the industry to re-examine its approaches, and when especially when it comes to women and other and bring in diverse talent more and give them more opportunities to shine, which wasn't like the case 10 years ago. So I feel like the world is really changing here, and I'm really presented with better opportunities now than before. And also, like, I work on making my resume. Trying to work hard really on trying to build, take the initiative, not wait until I'm just complain about there's no opportunities. Try to write my works, try to produce my films, try always to create opportunities. And I think in that way, a lot of there's more pressure for us women to assert ourselves, to put ourselves out there. But I think it is there are a lot of people who are willing to invest in women now and to push for women, and we need to show them that we are there, and we are ready to take the next chapter. So I'm really excited to see the Oscar having the first female of color winning the Best Director and Best Film. That is a great moment in our history, which is amazing.
Thank you. Paola, in your journey of kind of having, produced and directed a number of documentaries, in terms of, advice for our audience, what are some of the things that you've learned that have been helpful, for you along the way? And what are some of the things that you would now encourage people to steer away from, just as a point of guidance?
Well, I think that what I said earlier about sort of anchoring into your truth, I really do feel that in terms of not feeling like you have to fit a square peg into a round hole, I really like that message to land with filmmakers, all over, because we really need different perspectives, and we need new ways of thinking in the world right now. We need to be uplifted by people's, in ways that I don't always see. So I really, really recommend trusting, getting your own compass really, really clear, and then going from there. And so really support that process. At the same time, and if you can hold these two truths together at the same time, then I think you're in really good shape. So it's like, if you can do that, but also realize that you're like a tiny little speck in this massive universe of like, you know, so many stories and so much talent and so many people wanting to do the same thing. So humility and a sense of being driven by something greater than yourself. I really connected to what you said, Ted, because I think that there is something greater than us guiding us all the time in anything creative. I think creativity itself is a conduit of something that's beyond our intellect. And so stay open, stay humble, think of working in service, but in service of something bigger than yourself, and that you are being utilized. And in that utilization, you find that uniqueness, that thing that taps into your own little barometer. And if you do that, then that's magic. And we need more magic in the world. So.
Thank you. I want to try and address some of the questions that have come from the audience. Ted, the first question's directed to you, which is, how much power does an indie film producer have concerning final cut? When you find something wrong in the director's cut, how do you strategically communicate with directors to revise it, presumably without completely destroying the relationship with your filmmaker? They didn't put that in, but I know what that issue is.
Yeah, I think it goes back, you know, the past is prologue, right? You know, by the time you get there, you better have established real trust and confidence in each other. You hopefully the two of you, three of you, five of you, whatever the team is, you know, basically has learned how to listen, right? And you've already aligned on goals. You know, like I'm really comfortable having any meeting with anybody about whatever problems that, you know, occurring, partially because I've had enough experience to be kind of confident on being able to survey what the problems and the issues are, but also that I know that I'll make sure that they feel comfortable that they're heard, and I'm going to make sure they hear me. And, you know, the right idea, hopefully ego is going to be suppressed, and we're going to be in service of the film, and we know how to articulate that. So, you know, it's doing the work in the beginning to make sure that everyone's aligned in terms of the movie that they want to make, and then doing the work throughout for everyone to know that I have your back, you have my back, I'm listening to you, you're listening to me. We are helping solve these problems together, right? You know, and that's going to, that is going to lead to what the next steps are. You know, I at different times, like with some people, I actually think to get to that end, you actually want to make sure they have final cut. There's certain people that are very good collaborators, and if they know they have the final decision, they're going to actually be able to listen better. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, somebody is not going to have earned that right, or the financing won't grant them that right. So you're going to have to give them the confidence that you're going to protect them. Like truly in the nature, you know, if you're aspiring for art as well as entertainment, it's, you know, the director is so much a part of the marketing. The director really holds that, you know, and that can often be enough, like the real politic of solving that.
Look, it's interesting. I mean, I find that the issue of final cut comes up both in representing directors and representing producers, because producers don't always end up with, you know, final cut either, depending, you know, who they're in business with. And I would say a couple of things. One, in most independent films that have a limited budget, final cut is really, it's not a real issue, because you're lucky if you've got enough money to have, you know, one or two cuts of the movie. So as a matter of practicality, the director and the producer tend to be collaboratively working together. if you happen to be a DGA director, the DGA requires that the director has to be actively present and involved in every step of the post-production process. And so I think it does get back to, in part, what everyone's been talking about, choose the people you're going to get into bed with carefully, because if you have that collaborative relationship, ultimately you're all trying to achieve the same objective, which is to come up with something that's going to reach as many eyeballs as possible.
But invest in that relationship too, that on all sides, the financier, the distributor, your creative collaborators, invest in that so that you've earned trust and confidence, respect.
Haifaa, there was a question for you, which is from someone in the audience who's wanted to know, particularly about Arabic feature film regional distribution and what your experience has been like, with that.
Experience is tough. Like there is like Arabic films, like the film market in the Arab world is very much controlled by Egyptian films, like the mainstream films. Their independent films don't really survive in the box office. And Saudi Arabia didn't have movie theaters for so long. So the release of the films were you don't know where to release and what country and when. And even now with Saudi Arabia, once they opened, we were hit with COVID. So it is like distributing films that are out of the mainstream in the Middle East, whether it is documentaries or foreign films or not American or Chinese or Bollywood or Egyptian films, is always hard. It is, and I think now we have the streamers making things a lot easier to access those independent films. So I think the map has changed because of I think the streamers on Amazon and Netflix democratized the process a little bit. So you have place for those independent films to survive and reach an audience. And it is not like here, like in the West, when you have like a film, you launch in a festival and then you have a buzz and then you sell to distributors all over the world and you get some kind of a release, whether in the US or other places, an art house form. We don't have this art house place yet in the Middle East. It's not evolved. So hoping that it changes now, but I think streamers seem to be the answer now for a lot of independent films.
Thank you. Paola, I'd like to turn to you for the final question. Somebody asks, how did you support yourselves in your early producing filmmaking days? Do you have any advice for those of us who are early in our careers trying to get our foot in the door?
It's a really, really good question because it's been a journey. I worked in the news for a while, and then it was work for hire after that. When I wanted to do documentary films, I worked for a company that did like kind of cookie cutter documentaries, and just to kind of learn the ropes. And I kind of hit like creative bottom. I got super depressed and I was like, I can't believe that this is what I want to do. Like that was like my dream, was to go and do these documentaries. And it wasn't until I saw Barbara Koppel's American Dream, and I just thought, oh my God, like just the way her films just get right under your skin. I just thought like, that's what I have to do. And I don't care what I have to do it. So, it's really, I'll tell you, I got that book, The Artist's Way, really helped me, got me really clear on what I needed to do. And I balanced out being work for hire and doing my independent projects. And that's kind of how I did it. And I tried not to get super depressed in the process. And sometimes it worked out brilliantly. And other times it was just more of a struggle. And then what happened was, when I started becoming a mother, I was like, I moved into the area of being more entrepreneurial. And so we moved my husband came to work with me and we worked together and we started to be consultants on other people's films. We guided them through the creative process. And I found that I could kind of make it work that way as a consultant, and then also do projects on my own. And now I'm doing I've moved into sort of a more entrepreneurial stance. So I'm doing things way out of my league, and I've just gotten into the business of really finding other people that know how to do the things that I want to do really, really well. So one of them is like a music festival, and it's totally based on all the things I really deeply care about. Story-wise, it's still storytelling. It's bringing the world together. It's a peace and music festival. It's in another country, and I'm working with people that are just smarter and better, and I'm learning a ton and having a lot of fun working with people all over the world. So it's worked out to be very versatile. So I think the number one quality that I've learned as an independent is to be adaptive. So, just to be nimble, like don't get too fixated on like the one thing, and be open. And working for other people in corporate, television, and then coming off and doing my own independent stuff, it cut my teeth in a different way of thinking, and being able to like produce stuff fast. And that's good, especially when you have other people doing that for you, and you really know like what it means to go through the paces. So yeah, I think being adaptive and realizing that you're constantly, I'm constantly reinventing myself. That's kind of how I've survived in the business.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a couple of comments as we wind this up. And I think back over the last 3 panels that we've done. And I think the one thing that we all agree with, that this is a time where there are some great stories that are out there to be told. I think it's a time where there's some great stories that need to be told. I think one of the reasons that we live in a challenging time is that there is sometimes a lot of talk and not a lot of conversation. I think there are a lot of people who look at particular issues in the world and they don't understand and haven't had the benefit of the opportunity to understand both sides of the conversation. And I think through the art of filmmaking and storytelling, everyone in the audience, whether you're a writer, a director, or a producer, you really have an opportunity to make a meaningful difference in the world. I think, as people have indicated over the last few panels, is that the opportunity to get content seen today exists on more different platforms than ever before. People, when they're thinking about film festivals, they think about Cannes and Sundance, Toronto, but there are websites that will let you know that there is a film festival going on somewhere in the world every day of the week. And often there are festivals that cover every conceivable subject imaginable, some which are not for less than prime time television content. But there are so many opportunities. And despite the challenges in trying to get a film made, a documentary made, or even a short film made, I think the reward at the end of the experience is worth the pain and suffering. And I think you've heard that from all of the panelists that we've been lucky enough to have in our 3 panels over the last 3 months. So I'd really like to thank our 3 panelists for taking the time out of their busy schedules today. I hope it's been as inspiring to our audience as it has been to me to listen to the 3 of you. I would be remiss if I also didn't thank the people at the March on Washington Film Festival and the amazing producing team that's helped produce these panel discussions, because I sure as hell couldn't have done it without all of you. So thank you all so much. And in closing, I'd like to turn this back over to Broderick, who I know is going to make a few closing remarks.
Thank you, Craig. That was an excellent conversation. And thank you so much for your vision and invaluable support. You truly made this 3-month series extraordinary, engaging, and just rich in conversation. As Craig mentioned, thank you to all of our participants tonight and over the last 3 months, and to our audience members. Thank you so much for joining us. As well, I'd like to give a huge thanks to our line producer, Renelle Rogers, for all the technical support and many, many run-throughs over these last 3 months. And thanks to Opal Hope Bennett for leading our efforts in our annual Emerging and Student Filmmaker Competition. Lastly, please be on the lookout for our 2021 Film Festival coming in October. You'll hear more from us within the next few months. Until next time, march on.